out-of-control spending and borrowing in Washington leading to a Chinese takeover of America? Well, this week, China threatening to use America's debt as a weapon against us. And we've spent $3.5 trillion since President Obama took office, and we owe the Chinese almost $800 billion. Is this reason enough for Washington to stop spending now? Hi, everybody. I'm David Asman. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus with Bill Baldwin, Elizabeth McDonald, and Neil Weinberg, along with Mike Ozanian, Quentin Hardy, and John Rutledge. All right, Dr. John, let's start with you. You fear a Chinese takeover of America?
Of course there's a risk of being taken over, at least economically. You know, countries that spend too much money get taken over by countries that don't because the stock market falls, the income falls, inflation goes up, the currency goes down, and basically the power shifts in the other hands. And by the way, it's $2 trillion of our securities they have. They're very worried about U.S. inflation and about the currency. That's why they're taking moves on their portfolio.
So, Emac, are you worried about a Chinese takeover?
No, there's an important reason why. Because if China dumps all of its holdings en masse, that means it will really wreck its holdings. In other words, it won't get the yields it would get in the market.
They'd be shooting themselves in the foot.
They'd be shooting both their feet off. But, you know, the issue is with China, though, it is a domestic problem because China has been robbing our jobs by cheapening its currency, keeping its currency cheap. So our goods are artificially inflated there, while their goods are deflated here in price. And plus, they slap our goods with tariffs. That's why the car companies had to set up shop there. Buicks have a 40% tax on it from China.
Wow.
So that's a real problem. I don't see China, though, making moves with its portfolio to dump them because it would hurt them, though.
Bill, should we be concerned?
I think we should be concerned. Here's the problem. You have a once great civilization decaying into populist consumerism in which self-indulgent voters vote themselves great programs and don't want to pay for them. It happened to Greece. It's happening to the U.S. If you contrast Asia, which is full of industrious and hardworking people, frugal people, obviously this is going to be China's century.
Hold on a second, Bill. We're hardworking. We are frugal right now. Perhaps we weren't in the early part of this decade, but we are now.
I think the savings rates in China, not only in China, but in Japan, Korea, and Singapore are much higher than in the U.S.
Right.
That's going to cost us something someday.
I'm confused. I work for Bill, and anybody who works for Bill better be frugal, let me tell you.
He runs a tight ship.
I heard a lot of the same thing during the 80s, David. Yeah. We were going to be owned by Japan, and then, you know, let's not forget, we borrowed a fortune from France to fight the Revolutionary War. But Bill does make a very good point.
Well, you go back.
I'm an old guy. It depends on how you use the money you borrow. Unfortunately, now we're squandering the money we're borrowing from China. We're not using it to increase productive assets. We're plowing it into government jobs, Department of Education, Department of Labor, all these bureaucrats. Those programs are up. The budgets are $300 billion. It's not going into helping our economy.
Neil, a Chinese takeover?
I think this is, over the long term, a real concern. You know, when you borrow and borrow and borrow, whether you're a homeowner or you're a country, you can either go bankrupt, you can, in the case of a government, you can have to increase taxes, or you have to reduce spending. In any of these cases, what's ultimately going to happen is America will be more poor than it is now. China will become increasingly powerful in the world, and they will start dictating the terms, whether you're talking about foreign policy or economic terms or anything else. It's the same thing. If you owe the bank some money and you fail to pay it, the bank is going to start to dictate the terms.
China is eventually going to be the puppet master for the United States, according to Neil.
I can't get that far. I think there's two things going on here, David, that you really need to think about. One, just how fat and stupid are we? And here, the news is not so good because our people are really getting bad messages. Did you see Palin last week at the Tea Party convention? I don't mind she wrote on her hand, but what she wrote down bugged me. She wrote, budget cuts, yay that, cut out the word budget, put in tax cuts. So once again, you can have it all and never pay for it. That's crazy. But then, on Friday, Harry Reid said cutting $70 billion from the jobs bill, so maybe America can learn. I hope so. Which brings me to the second point. Who would you rather be in this movie? Us, which have a few problems, or China? Demographic nightmare, financial house of cards, water problem bringing them to their knees, totalitarian state.
Well, John, you know, they're 10% of the population is unemployed right now. I don't think they feel either fat or particularly spoiled right now. They're pulling their belt in as tight as they can.
Absolutely, but you know, they felt pretty good at the beginning of the decline of the Roman Empire too. It's all about energy and productivity. Look, Japan had 100 million people. China's got 1.5 billion people. They're going to have a GDP larger than ours in 10 years. So we need to figure out how to grow together. They grow 10%, we grow 1%. We need more growth.
You know what?
We need more productivity growth.
I'm sorry. We've heard this Rome will, the United States is like Rome burning.
Right.
It doesn't wash. The thing is, China, and Quentin's acid reflux aside, the American people are hardworking. They are entrepreneurial. The problem is state capitalism versus
They're getting
market.
the wrong message.
Hang on a second. State capitalism versus market capitalism. The Chinese banks are overloaded with debt. They've got rickety, serious problems to the point where short seller Jimmy Chanos is saying, watch out. This economy could collapse. It's overheating. There is a huge bubble going on in China right now.
So China might be a house of cards deal. Hold on a second. Go ahead.
We've written that story, and I wouldn't hold up the Chinese banking system as a paragon of anything good. But what I will tell you, if you look at the United States, think about the risk if you are someone in this country who's borrowing money like the U.S. government. If China pulls back a little, they're not going to suddenly sell all their U.S. treasuries because that would kill themselves.
Of course, Bill, if China collapses, what happens to us? I mean, they're holding so much of our debt, and if they can't make our payments, we're in a little bit of trouble here.
I don't think China's going to collapse, and we probably won't collapse either, but it's kind of interesting. If you look at the insurance costs for insuring against a U.S. government default, it's gone up a lot in the past couple of years, and there's a good reason for that.
Quick point.
We got no plan for paying back these trillions we're dishing out.
A quick point that we miss is that the United States is China's biggest customer. That is our trump card, along with India, and we see it in Mexico and Indonesia.
Well, Mike,
there are other countries that are their customers, and we could start asking for
if you look at the
more
polls,
of what we deserve.
Americans themselves believe now that China is the world's leading economic power by 44%. United States only comes up at 27% by that poll. So Americans are beginning to wonder whether China's the leader.
Well, and you can't blame them, David. China's growth rate is much faster than ours. And as you just alluded to a moment ago, our unemployment rate is exceptionally high. The problem is that we're not using the money we're borrowing in a productive way.
Quentin, go ahead.
I lived in Asia for 13 years, 7 years in Japan. When I went over there, we were worried our high school students weren't learning enough Japanese because they were going to run the world. They have a high savings rate, but they blew it in the end. American ingenuity really is a mighty thing. We can get back on the right track.
Well, John,
I wouldn't want to be China.
That's a
in this
great
movie.
point, John. I remember all those fears about Japan 10, 15, 20 years ago. They never came to fruition. Maybe the same is true with China.
Well, they shot off both their feet and their hands with an 11-year deflation. Besides, there's only a little over 100 million of those guys. There's 1.5 billion guys in China. Look, last year, China alone represented half of the growth of the entire global economy.
Right.
The year before, it was a third.
But, John, you spent
more
more time in China than most people I know put together. The fact is, you know very well, China's always cooking their books. Can we believe all of their stats on how much they're growing?
Well, I saw the budget last week, and I think book cooking works just fine here, too, David.
Well, that's true.
Well, let's talk about China.
Of course we don't know. Of course we don't know we should believe their numbers. But I'll tell you, when you're there, they're growing 10% range. We're growing 1% range.
Look at
that's been going on a long time.
But John, quickly, China's economic statistics are routinely deep fried. All right, and so you see it in their freight traffic, their electricity numbers. They're always overstating their productivity.
Not just cooked, but deep fried.
So
I like that. We got to leave it at that, gang. The blizzard of 2010.